O que acende a sua vontade de começar algo? Tem uma faísca em você que te chama para empreender, investir, dar novos rumos para sua vida. E para todos os seus começos, você pode contar com Santander Select. Um banco mais pessoal, mais próximo, mais humano. Um time de especialistas com olhar atento para cada momento da sua vida. Porque você sabe, só quem já deu muitos passos está pronto para continuar começando. Santander Select. Começa em você, começa agora.
Desculpa a interrupção do meio tempo, mas só passei rapidinho pra te lembrar que Conmebol Copa América 2024 e a UEFA Euro 2024 já estão disponíveis no EA Sports FC Mobile. Não perca tempo, vem participar desses eventos e vivenciar o melhor do futebol. Viva a emoção do verdadeiro futebol e escreva um novo capítulo nas histórias dos seus jogadores favoritos e todos os times participantes. EA Sports FC Mobile, o jogo de todo mundo no seu bolso. Participe e jogue agora. Inclui compras opcionais dentro do jogo, inclui itens aleatórios.
Welcome into 49ers Access. My name is Sterling Bennett. Hope you had a wonderful July 4th weekend and you kept all of your fingers after some hopefully not too long and loud fireworks for your neighbors, but we have some Niners news to discuss. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe because the Brandon Aiyuk saga has continued through the holiday weekend, and he continues to pour fuel onto the fire during contract negotiations. Although this one, not as serious or not as kind of in your face as, let's say, the TikTok with Jaden Daniels or the Pivot podcast, which was great, by the way, with Ryan Clark and company at the Pivot, where Aiyuk explained his point of view, where his standpoint was, and really kind of dove into what he wants. Now, in that Pivot podcast, Ryan Clark asked Brandon Aiyuk where he sees himself playing in 2024. And he said, in order, with the San Francisco 49ers. If not with the Niners, with the Commanders. And if not with the Commanders, with the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's not exactly what we're going to talk about today. What we're going to discuss today is what Brandon Aiyuk did over the July 4th week or holiday, where he put on TikTok his second TikTok post connecting him to the Washington Commanders. So earlier in the offseason, he put a video out saying he was crying and Jaden Daniels was there as he was talking to him on FaceTime, where Aiyuk said, they, being the Niners, do not want me. That led to a myriad of speculation as to what that might mean. Aiyuk explained what that meant on the Pivot podcast, meaning they didn't want me at the money I asked for. Now we're here. Now we're here on July 8th after the weekend as we inch closer to training camp, and Brandon Aiyuk put on TikTok a picture, a still image of Washington Commanders practice tape. Now, I don't know if tampering's involved. I don't know if the league can come down a player, a coach, assistant. I have no idea how Brandon Aiyuk got Washington Commanders practice tape, but he did. Somehow, some way, Brandon Aiyuk got Washington Commanders practice tape, and knowing we haven't even gone through training camp just yet, if it was this year's Washington Commanders with his former teammate at ASU, Jaden Daniels, well, there's a clear connection because him and Jaden Daniels being former teammates, being friends, Jaden Daniels being the person he was FaceTiming during the They Don't Want Me TikTok, and during the Pivot podcast with Ryan Clark, where Brandon Aiyuk himself said, if the Niners don't want me, I'll probably be a Commander. If the Commanders don't want me, I'll probably be a Pittsburgh Steeler. Jaden Daniels was in the room with him, which if you want to connect dots, there's got to be some tampering here somewhere. Now, that's all speculation. Not exactly sure how Brandon Aiyuk got Washington Commanders practice film or tape or whatnot, but he had a still image of only accessible photos and videos via the team themselves. So somehow he got the image, somehow he got the picture, but that's not exactly what we're going to talk about today either. In fact, today we're going to dive into what CBS Sports put together in regards to Brandon Aiyuk, because I know many of you out there think this deal is not going to get done with Brandon Aiyuk. Many of you out there, many Niner fans or Commander fans, believe there is serious traction in regards to trading Brandon Aiyuk, and everything points to, if it's going to be a trade, it'll be with the Washington Commanders. Now, that said, I don't think Aiyuk's going anywhere other than San Francisco. I think a deal still gets done, but for the sake of conversation, let us react to what CBS Sports put together today. And let's see here. You can see behind me, we have the CBSSports.com article. I believe the writer of the article is Cody Benjamin. Shout out Cody. And he put together 3 trade packages for Niners receiver Brandon Aiyuk if he was going to get traded to the Washington Commanders. So let's dive into these 3 trade packages. Do they make sense? Are they good? Are they bad? Financially, do they make sense? Does each team get a fair shake in the trade package? Let's dive into trade proposal number 1. This is the most straightforward trade proposal on the docket that Cody Benjamin put together, and it is as simple goes. The Washington Commanders get wide receiver Brandon Aiyuk, and the San Francisco 49ers get a 2025 first-round pick. Now, simply, this is a good pick. This is a good trade if you are both teams. The Commanders get their star receiver. They pair him with Jaden Daniels. They also pair him with Terry McLaurin out there and Jahan Dotson. And they give a young quarterback in Jaden Daniels 3 really good receiver weapons. Now they'll have to extend Brandon Aiyuk, mind you, after the trade. And if you're San Francisco, you get a first-round pick. Here's a caveat, though. Had any team offered San Francisco a first-round pick in this past year's draft, you have to believe that San Francisco would have taken that deal. That's why a deal never happened, because no one offered San Francisco a first-round pick. There was plenty of speculation. There was plenty of rumors as to what were teams offering San Francisco. Whether it was Jacksonville at 16, then they moved back in the draft and still got Brian Thomas. The Bears were never going to not try to get Rome Odunze for their young quarterback in Caleb Williams. There just wasn't a good offer on the table that had a first-round pick involved for Brandon Aiyuk. And knowing that San Francisco has all the leverage, well, yes, a first-round pick is great, and it's likely the highest round pick you're going to get. You're back in the first round. You'd have 2 first-round draft picks next year, and it's a great thing for a team who's going to have to pay Brock Purdy. And in this case, in this trade package and proposal, the idea is you just drafted Ricky Pearsall. You have Deebo Samuel. You have Juwan Jennings. That's your trio going forward with players like Jacob Cowing and Ronnie Bell and Chris Conley behind them. I just don't think San Francisco at this point in time would trade Brandon Aiyuk for a pick in next year's draft. It doesn't make sense to me. You want to win now. You're banking on a future first-round draft pick in which you don't know where the Commanders would indeed pick. Let's say Aiyuk goes to Washington, and him and Jaden Daniels ball out, and they have a better season than expected. San Francisco is sitting back at, let's say they're in the late 20s, maybe in the 30s if everything goes perfectly for you. And then the Commanders are at 20. The Commanders are at 17. That's not exactly where you want to be for a star receiver like Brandon Aiyuk. You want to find yourself in the 12 and under range when you have a star receiver in Brandon Aiyuk, likely going to get better in the upcoming season. So in this case, if this was, 3 or 4 months ago, and this was leading into this year's NFL draft, albeit the Commanders had the 2nd overall pick, which wouldn't happen anyways, but let's say we fast forward in time. Let's say Aiyuk plays out the entirety of the year on the 5th-year option, or let's say he holds out for whatever reason doesn't get his contract. They can't come to an agreement. In San Francisco, either franchise tags him if he does play. If he doesn't play, he doesn't get the accrued season, falling back into San Francisco's lap on his fifth-year option again. So, for whatever reason, he doesn't play. For whatever reason, San Francisco retains his rights either via a fifth-year option again or the franchise tag. If you know where Washington will be by year's end, in which you should, and you feel comfortable making this trade, this is a great trade for next year's draft in 8 months. In 9 months, once you know when the season is over where the Commanders are going to pick. But as of now, 2 weeks away from training camp when you want to win it all this year, this is a trade proposal I would nix. I would say, no, it's not going to happen. I get it. It helps both teams, but look, I wouldn't love this. It doesn't help San Francisco now, which is what they're trying to do. Maximize now, because you likely won't be able to maximize forever. Let's move on to trade proposal number 2. This one is a little more tricky, and I think you can dive into maybe there is some potential in this move for San Francisco that really hasn't been met by the player coming back in return for Brandon Aiyuk. As you can see on the screen, the Washington Commanders would get just Brandon Aiyuk from the San Francisco 49ers. The Niners would get a 2025 second-round pick, a 2025 fourth-round pick, and receiver Dyami Brown from the Washington Commanders. And if you read more into what Cody Benjamin is saying here in the article, he talks about how while San Francisco doesn't get their first-round pick, they get a really high day number 2 selection, or what's supposed to be. They get a fourth-round pick. You have 6 picks in the first 4 rounds of next year's draft. It gives you flexibility to move up and move back. You also get a receiver in Dyami Brown, who, although has been rather underwhelming since being drafted by the Commanders, he has speed. He also likes to block, and he fits what Kyle Shanahan's receiver archetype might be. He also would still get to play behind people like Deebo Samuel, like Jawan Jennings, and hopefully Ricky Pearsall-Hicks, where Dyami Brown could be your 4th or 5th receiver on this team and kind of be what you wanted Danny Gray to be. A speedy, deep threat, run-blocking kind of player, which, given Kyle Shanahan's track record, Brown would find playing time in San Francisco. That said, one issue with Dyami Brown is you're trading Brandon Aiyuk, a proven player, an ascending player in the NFL ranks, a player that wants to get paid $30 million per year, which, by all means, get your money, Brandon. Second-round pick is fine. Fourth-round pick is fine in a package. When you add Dyami Brown, which if you like a second-round pick and you like a fourth-round pick in next year's draft, cool. Maybe to you, Brown's icing on the cake. If you can't get a first-round pick, get 2 day 2 picks and day 3 picks with the second and fourth rounder, and then Dyami Brown's kind of a toss-in, see what you can get out of him, hopefully help him meet his potential.
O que acende a sua vontade de começar algo? Tem uma faísca em você que te chama para empreender, investir, dar novos rumos para sua vida. E para todos os seus começos, você pode contar com Santander Select. Um banco mais pessoal, mais próximo, mais humano. Um time de especialistas com olhar atento para cada momento da sua vida. Porque você sabe, só quem já deu muitos passos está pronto para continuar começando. Santander Select. Começa em você, começa agora.
That said, Dyami Brown so far through 3 years in Washington, 3 rather dysfunctional years in Washington, the highest amount of receptions he's had in a season is 12. 12. He's never had more than 13 receptions in a single season. And keep in mind, he's a 3-year pro coming into his 4th year of his career, and he's played and averaged over 15 games a season. So he's played. He just doesn't impact games whatsoever. He's only had 3 total touchdowns through 3 seasons. You are banking on a second and fourth round pick hitting, which they could. Aiyuk was traded up for in the first round. We've seen in San Francisco plenty of third through seventh round picks hit. Look at Brock Purdy, look at Fred Warner, look at Dre Greenlaw, George Kittle, and so on and so forth. It's not as if a second round pick or a fourth round pick couldn't be a star for you in the future. It's just that that's two unknown pieces that, relatively speaking, are not going to be high-end prospects when talking about missing on a first-round draft pick, right? Then Dyami Brown, who there's a real potential he wouldn't even make the team because you picked Pearsall and Jacob Cowing in last year's draft, and you're already carrying Danny Gray, who could already be on the outs. You already have Ronnie Bell. You have Chris Conley. You have Tariq Owens. You just brought back Trent Taylor. There's a real chance, even if you make this move with the second, fourth round pick, Dyami Brown does not even make this team or is rostered in 1 year time. And don't forget, he'd be buried on this year's team. He'd be behind. He'd probably be your fifth or sixth receiver, in which this case, San Francisco's fifth and sixth guys are either kick return or punt return players and or are practice squad elevations. This really doesn't make that much of a sense, or the move doesn't make a lot of sense for San Francisco. One, because Dyami Brown, unproven, hasn't done much, although I do like his makeup. The other thing is he doesn't even offer you practice squad or special teams flexibility. And in this day and age, with the new kick return rules, you likely want a running back doing kick returns because they get a running start on things, unlike the last few years, which is why you're looking at Cody Schrader, Isaac Guerendo, and Jacob Cowing being the 3 or 4 guys you want in that room vying for that kick return job. Whereas 2 years ago, even last year, Brown would make a little more sense, but he slots in nearly identical in placing with Danny Gray on the depth chart currently, which right now is not a good place to be if you are Dyami Brown or if you're San Francisco making this move. But that brings us to, again, our final trade proposal via CBS Sports and via Cody Benjamin. It's a crazy one. It's a doozy. It's one that just might intrigue you. And if you can see on the screen on YouTube, again, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And before we dive into our last trade proposal, I want to thank our sponsor for today, SeatGeek. Use our promo code 49ersaccess, 49ERS, ACCESS at SeatGeek.com and save yourself $20 off. Let's dive right back into proposal number 3. This is a 3-team trade. Those rarely ever happen in the NFL, but it's a 3-team trade. It involves the Commanders, the Niners, and the Denver Broncos. And I think the last time San Francisco and Denver made a trade, maybe I'm wrong here, I think it was Jonas Griffith 2 training camps ago when San Francisco was loaded at linebacker. So there is a history there with the current GMs and coaching staffs and whatnot, albeit Sean Payton's now the man in charge in Denver. For the front offices have or do have ties. McGlinchey's in Denver. DJ Jones is now in Denver. But let's talk about this trade proposal involving the Broncos, Niners, and Commanders. In this case, the Commanders, again, only getting Brandon Aiyuk from the San Francisco 49ers. The Broncos would get Jamison Crowder from Washington and Washington's 2025 third-round pick. Okay, what would San Francisco get in return? San Francisco would get back a 2025 second-round pick from Washington, and they would get veteran receiver Courtland Sutton. Now, when you hear the name Courtland Sutton attached to San Francisco, well, it's not a first-round draft pick. You're only getting a second back, but you are getting Courtland Sutton, who by all means is a really proven talent. He's headed into his age 29 season, and he's played over 15 games, all but one season throughout his career. Had over 1,000 yards in a couple years ago, but has averaged over 770 the past couple years. He had 10 touchdowns last season with Russell Wilson and Sean Payton in that atrocious offense that was the Broncos. Well, maybe there are some questions of health for Courtland Sutton. Overall, he becomes that bigger body, go up and get it receiver San Francisco has wanted for a long time, arguably since Terrell Owens, arguably since, almost near 40 years old, Randy Moss in 2011 and 12, when they went on a run against the Ravens in the Super Bowl. Courtland Sutton, this trade package really does intrigue me. Now, the one thing about Sutton is that I think he would pair excellently with Deebo Samuel. Now, you got Deebo, you'd have Jawan Jennings, you have Courtland Sutton, you have Ricky Pearsall, you have Jacob Cowling, and you get that second-round pick. Now, it's a 3-team trade. These things don't usually happen. These things rarely ever happen. But I do like this trade more than, let's say, the first one, where it's Aiyuk for a first-round draft pick. That's the easiest freeing up money trade there is of the 3 proposals on the docket for and by Cody Benjamin of CBS Sports. Proposal number 2, I don't love it that much. A second and a fourth and Dyami Brown. I'd rather have this trade proposal over the second one for sure. And I can make an argument that I'm getting a second-round pick from Washington and Courtland Sutton. This is great for San Francisco if they're going to make a trade, which again, the odds of this happening are very, very slim. The odds that the Broncos even want to part ways with Courtland Sutton, very, very thin. That said, Courtland Sutton, like Brandon Aiyuk, has talked about holding out a training camp because he wants a new deal. So you have to ask yourself, while Sutton's a great receiver, he'd be a phenomenal piece into the cog that is Kyle Shanahan's offense. A second-round pick in return, also a great return when you combine that with Courtland Sutton for Brandon Aiyuk. But who are you willing to pay? Now, Courtland Sutton going to be a lot cheaper than Brandon Aiyuk. He's going into his age, again, 28 season? He's going into his age 29 season, excuse me. He's almost hitting 30. He's not going to get $30 million a year. He's not even going to ask for $30 million a year. He'll probably be in the low 20s. You can save money by extending Courtland Sutton, get a second-round pick in return. I think this of the 3 proposals by Cody Benjamin makes a lot of sense for both teams. In fact, all 3 teams, and even the Broncos. You get Jamison Crowder, right? This deal has to make sense for everybody. The Commanders get what they want. The Broncos get a 3rd-round pick and a veteran receiver back for Courtland Sutton. And the Commanders get Aiyuk, and Niners get Sutton and a 2nd-round pick. You can maybe argue that the Commanders are giving up too much in this deal, but if you're referring to what Benjamin's already put out there, you want to give up Dyami Brown, a 2nd and a 4th. I think this deal makes a lot of sense to facilitate. Maybe instead of a 3rd-round pick for Sutton, it's a 4th-round pick. Maybe instead of a 2nd-round pick to San Francisco, it's a 3rd-round pick, which I would decline, mind you. But I think if you told me tomorrow that San Francisco and Aiyuk are not going to get a deal done, it's done, it's kaput, it's over, things have fallen apart, they are past the point of return in regards to discussing a contract extension with Aiyuk, and they have to trade him. He's requested a trade, he wants out of there, and he's not going to play all year. Sure, they can play hardball. We've discussed through the entire offseason, if he holds out, doesn't get an accrued season, and he's right back into the exact same spot he is now next year, would San Francisco want to jeopardize that? Would San Francisco want to jeopardize not having him on the field? And would they feel it be better to get a 2nd-round pick in Courtland Sutton in return to help them win now? I think of the 3 proposals, you can make your case for Aiyuk in the 1st-round pick, a 1-for-1. I believe San Francisco would have made that trade pre this past year's draft. But let's look at now. this move doesn't just help you in the upcoming draft in nearly a year. This move for Sutton and a second-round pick helps you today, getting Sutton in the building. Well, yes, he's going to want a pay raise. It's not going to be $30 million. And you get that second-round pick. You are essentially putting the best case scenario together if you have to trade Aiyuk. It's a win now move with the potential, even if you didn't want to pay Sutton, you can let him walk in free agency. Probably get a comp pick in return, I believe, if that's the case. And you'd already get a second round pick. So there is a way San Francisco could kind of finagle their way into, even if they get Sutton, maximize him for a year if he's healthy, watch him walk in the offseason, or maybe another second round pick or a third round pick. So this move, although I don't think it's likely, if the Broncos get Jamison Crowder and a third round pick from Washington, the Commanders get Brandon Aiyuk, and San Francisco gets Courtland Sutton and a second round pick from Washington, this is a great deal for San Francisco, although I, again, do not think it's going to happen. I'm of the mindset that San Francisco is going to stay put. They're not going to trade Aiyuk. We've talked ad nauseum of when is this thing going to happen? When is the bow going to break? I'm of the mindset that the Washington Commanders, well, yes, want Brandon Aiyuk. Which team doesn't want Brandon Aiyuk? You call the Kansas City Chiefs today, they'd want Brandon Aiyuk. San Francisco wants to keep Brandon Aiyuk. That said, the odds a move happens, a trade occurs, when there are other players like CeeDee Lamb who want a deal, Courtland Sutton wants a new deal. I wouldn't even be surprised. Tyreek Hill, who's still under contract, he wants a new deal. They saw receivers get paid. They wanted to reset their money. And San Francisco does not view Aiyuk like a CeeDee Lamb, like a Justin Jefferson, but I think they find a sweet spot. Training camp is almost here. Hopefully Aiyuk stops posting Commanders practice film on TikTok. If that's, again, how is that not tampering with somebody? Who fed him that film? Who gave him that film? Was he and Jaden Daniels watching film? Is this a thing that players do in the offseason? They share their oppositions and their own film with other players around the league? If so, don't do that. That's weird to me to even think about doing so. Maybe I'm making a bigger deal about it than it is, but doesn't seem like you want to give the opponent a competitive advantage if they're possible. But it feels like as of now, Aiyuk's trying to push the Commanders' narrative to make San Francisco blink and have them go, okay, we'll give you what you want. But the odds are Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch and the San Francisco front office are going to read this, see his TikTok, and say, none of that matters to us. We'll see you day one of training camp, right? Which Aiyuk himself has said he's going to be working out at the facility, getting ready for the season. So a trade happens, maybe. I doubt it. But of these three proposals, which one would you make? Would you want Courtland Sutton in a second-round pick? Would you want Diami Brown from the Commanders along with the second and fourth round pick? Would you simply just want a first round pick in return for Brandon Aiyuk? Tell me down below in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, my name is Sterling Bennett, and as always, stay faithful.